Anora is my favorite film of the year. Now, I've covered a bit of who Sean Baker is as a director through his fairly short filmography, and I believe this film, while it may not be the painting of underrepresented America that his previous films were, is able to reach a broader demographic than probably the rest of them.
Me go fuck myself, me fuck myself, you go fuck yourself and your fucking mother, motherfucker!
It's still a Sean Baker movie, it still covers marginalized communities, and it still has his very humanistic sense of capturing real people going about their lives. I've mentioned that the idea of America is, more often than not, at the very center of his films, both the idealistic and the pessimistic sides of it. But what Baker does in Anora brings his philosophy to the very forefront of its story. And what results is a very, very important theme that's probably more valuable than ever in the modern day. And that's connection. The film's story has been compared to the tale of Cinderella, and it's very clear to see why. Annie, played by Mikey Madison, who's very great in this by the way, is a sex worker who's barely able to live on the outskirts of New York City and Brooklyn. She gets swept up underneath her feet by Ivan, a Russian oligarch, to live the blissful life she's always wanted to live, with some obvious hurdles in the way to that fairy tale ending. While the comparisons are obviously warranted on the surface, it's what Baker creates with the skeleton of the old fable that makes Anora one of the best films of the year. The story that most Westerners are familiar with and are probably comparing the film to is the 1950 Disney movie of the same name, where, spoiler alert, the prince eventually finds and marries the impoverished Cinderella, whose feet fit the glass slipper that he swears up and down will be the love of his life. It's a film based on themes of class inequality and empathy for one another, which are also very much found in Anora, but it's also based on the power of human connection, where, having seen both Cinderella in completely different states, one in the classic blue dress that everyone knows, and the other in regular attire, they still live happily ever after. Because it doesn't matter what you wear or where you came from, but who you are and what you mean to each other. It shows that the bond between the two goes beyond how they look and the optics that come with it. That's one of the many lessons of the story. And in Anora, the film begs to ask, what if you take that away completely? What if instead of being bonded by a mutual spiritual connection, you're bonded by a physical one? I mean, quite literally, that's Annie's line of work. Full frontal, intimate, and physical connections with almost all the bells and whistles of a real relationship. All that's missing is the real bond itself. Materialistic-based connections where it's all about cold cash or the trade of something between two parties. And for Annie, it's blurred her relationships even outside her career, where everything is transactional and almost nothing is truly genuine.
I approached this film in terms of themes, not exact issues. I wanted this movie to explore different themes, and one of them is power and levels of power and power dynamics. And yes, in terms of Anora, she has her power. She's aware of her power. She's in control, even when the world around her is coming down on her.
And this mindset follows to her so-called relationship with Ivan, getting picked up underneath her feet to a multi-million-dollar mansion, to dreamlike vacations to Vegas, to eventually being married, hopeful to live happily ever after. Your modern-day Cinderella story, all without a true connection. Their relationship starts out transactional, and their marriage ends up being a transaction. Hell, they get a Vegas marriage for Yvonne to stay in the US, really speaking on the commitment of the faux relationship. And Annie's struggle to see the reality in this Cinderella-esque fantasy is something that looms throughout the film's runtime. Always having to scream to the world that they're married and that she's Yvonne's wife, and that it is real, with tangible proof like paperworks and rings to back it up. That's not to say it's extremely depressing. Sean Baker is at the helm of it, and it's probably Baker's best effort to weave in slapstick comedy through his very emotional narrative.
You know, I always think that humor is necessary in human stories because, hey, look, it's part of our lives, you know? We all use humor to cope humor to get by, and I can't stand when I see a film devoid of humor, or a story that's devoid of humor, because this is not real. And I guess the challenge is balancing that. When you want to tell a story that is ultimately tragic, how much do you infuse humor and where?
But that's exactly the tragedy in it all. Behind the film's incredibly celebratory tone, crowd-pleasing vibe, legitimately funny scenes, and warm and vibrant colors is a woman who, presumably, all throughout her adult life has known nothing but this kind of relationship, where the more loving you appear and the more physically in tune you are with your partner, it isn't only better for the optics, but for the health of your relationship, whether it be business or personal. And for Ani's relationship with Yvonne, a nearly non-existent one at that. And of course, it doesn't really check out when there's no bedrock for something real in place. And the moment she's introduced to something real, something genuine, and some kind of mutual connection, for her to truly acknowledge it truly, she needs to give something back in return. Just like her work as an erotic dancer, just like her so-called relationship with Yvonne, and just like any other transaction. Where Cinderella is a story based on real connections outside of materialistic mindsets and social optics, Anora is a story about fake relationships fueled by materialistic mindsets and social optics. The structure, its themes, the Disney princess montages are all in place. It's just the need of human connection that's absent. And that is Anora's Cinderella tragedy.